We'll begin with the recitation of the verses.
अथ चतुर्दशोऽध्यायः गुणत्रयविभागयोगः। श्रीभगवानुवाच परं भूयः प्रवक्ष्यामि ज्ञानानां ज्ञानमुत्तमम् यज्ञात्वा मुनयः सर्वे परां सिद्धिमितो गताः। इदं ज्ञानमुपाश्रित्य मम साधर्म्यमागताः। सर्गेऽपि नोपजायन्ते प्रलये न व्यथन्ति च। मम योनिर्महद्ब्रह्म तस्मिन् गर्भं दधाम्यहम्। सम्भवः सर्वभूतानां ततो भवति भारत। सर्वयोनिषु कौन्तेय मूर्तयः सम्भवन्ति याः तासां ब्रह्म महद्योनिरहं बीजप्रदः पिता। सत्त्वं रजस्तम इति गुणाः प्रकृतिसम्भवाः निबध्नन्ति महाबाहो देहे देहिनमव्ययम्। तत्र सत्त्वं निर्मलत्वात् प्रकाशकमनामयम्। सुखसङ्गेन बध्नाति ज्ञानसङ्गेन चानघ। रजो रागात्मकं विद्धि तृष्णासङ्गसमुद्भवम्। तन्निबध्नाति कौन्तेय कर्मसङ्गेन देहिनम्। तमस्त्वज्ञानजं विद्धि मोहनं सर्वदेहिनाम्। प्रमादालस्य निद्राभिस्तन्निबध्नाति भारत। सत्त्वं सुखे सञ्जयति रजः कर्मणि भारत। ज्ञानमावृत्य तु तमः प्रमादे सञ्जयत्युत। रजस्तमश्चाभिभूय सत्त्वं भवति भारत। रजः सत्त्वं तमश्चैव तमः सत्त्वं रजस्तथा। सर्वद्वारेषु देहेऽस्मिन् प्रकाश उपजायते। ज्ञानं यदा तदा विद्याद् विवृद्धं सत्त्वमित्युत। लोभः प्रवृत्तिरारम्भः कर्मणामशमः स्पृहा। रजस्येतानि जायन्ते विवृद्धे भरतर्षभ। अप्रकाशो प्रवृत्तिश्च प्रमादो मोह एव च। तमस्येतानि जायन्ते विवृद्धे कुरु नन्दन। यदा सत्त्वे प्रवृद्धे तु प्रलयं याति देहभृत्। तदोत्तमविदां लोकानमलान् प्रतिपद्यते। रजसि प्रलयं गत्वा कर्मसङ्गिषु जायते। तथा प्रलीनस्तमसि मूढयोनिषु जायते। कर्मणः सुकृतस्याहुः सात्विकं निर्मलं फलम्। रजसस्तु फलं दुःखमज्ञानं तमसः फलम्। सत्त्वात् सञ्जायते ज्ञानं रजसो लोभ एव च। प्रमादमोहौ तमसो भवतो ज्ञानमेव च। ऊर्ध्वं गच्छन्ति सत्त्वस्था मध्ये तिष्ठन्ति राजसाः। जघन्यगुणवृत्तिस्था अधो गच्छन्ति तामसाः। नान्यं गुणेभ्यः कर्तारं यदा द्रष्टानुपश्यति। गुणेभ्यश्च परं वेत्ति मद्भावं सोऽधिगच्छति। गुणानेतानतीत्यत्रीन् देही देहसमुद्भवान्। जन्म मृत्युजरा दुःखैर्विमुक्तो मृतमश्नुते। अर्जुन उवाच कैर्लिङ्गैस्त्रीन् गुणानेतानतीतो भवति प्रभो। किमाचारः कथं चेतान् स्त्रीन् गुणानतिवर्तते। श्रीभगवानुवाच प्रकाशं च प्रवृत्तिं च मोहमेव च पाण्डव। न द्वेष्टि सम्प्रवृत्तानि न निवृत्तानि काङ्क्षति उदासीनवदासीनो गुणैर्यो न विचाल्यते गुणा वर्तन्त इत्येवं योऽवतिष्ठति नेङ्गते समदुःखसुखः स्वस्थः समलोष्टाश्मकाञ्चनः तुल्यप्रिया प्रियो धीरस्तुल्यनिन्दात्मसंस्तुतिः मानापमानयोस्तुल्यस्तुल्यो मित्रारिपक्षयोः सर्वारम्भपरित्यागी गुणातीतः स उच्यते मां च यो व्यभिचारेण भक्तियोगेन सेवते सगुणान् समतीत्यैतान् ब्रह्मभूयाय कल्पते ब्रह्मणो हि प्रतिष्ठाहम् अमृतस्याव्ययस्य च शाश्वतस्य च धर्मस्य सुखस्यैकान्तिकस्य च ॐ तत्सदिति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे गुणत्रयविभागयोगो नाम चतुर्दशोऽध्यायः।
Hare Krishna. So today we'll be doing the 14th chapter entitled Three Modes of Material Nature. Another very important chapter with a lot of practical application. We'll begin with the invocation. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gnananjanashalakaya Chakthurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sattvijatam Sargana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sargana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishwavanaswate Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vashadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Known as this chapter is known as Gunatraya Vibhagaha. Guna means, analogy is given to a rope. Just like if you look at how the rope is made, you take three strings and intertwine them. This way, you keep on intertwining till you make a very strong rope. The rope becomes so strong compared to the string, original string. The rope becomes so strong that it's very difficult to get yourself free from that if you are bound by that rope. So, although material nature is inferior to the living entity, it becomes so strong that it becomes very difficult for the living entity to overcome. So Krishna is telling how to, by performing devotional service, one can overcome that which is insurmountable. As we saw in the 47th chapter also, Krishna said, Devi Hesha Gunamayi. This divine energy of the Lord, because it is related to the Lord. Gunamayi Maya means it's made out of the three modes of material nature. Mama Maya Durattiya. It's very difficult to overcome. But Mami Eva Ye Prapadyante. If one surrenders unto me, Maya Metam Tantate, one can get free from that and engage in his constitutional position. So can you see my screen and hear me properly?
Yes, Prabhuji, it is clear.
Yeah, in case my internet sometimes is unstable, so in case I get disconnected, also, please hold on, I'll come back. Okay.
Sure.
So here it says three modes. Modes means they are not permanent. So that we have to understand. But although there are three things, three modes are not permanent, somehow they combine together and appear to be permanent. So that is the beauty, because each mode is dominating one time, next moment the other mode, just like a wheel is there. As the wheel is rotating under the influence of time, the top portion of the wheel comes down and the bottom goes up. So this continues. Similarly, under the influence of time, these three modes, they alternate between each other as to which is dominating. Sometimes mode of goodness, sometimes mode of passion, sometimes mode of ignorance, or Sattva-guna, Rajoguna, Tamoguna. And this is happening within all of us, even up from Brahma down to the smallest living entity. These three modes are always in competition. And so this conditions the soul. Conditions the soul means he is not able to act on the platform of the soul. Because in the earlier chapter, we saw that the soul does nothing in this material world. Everything that we see around us is being performed by the three modes of material nature. The example is given like previously they used to perform puppet shows. The puppet show, it looks like the puppet is moving on his hands and legs, but actually there are people behind the screen who are controlling the movement of the puppet with the help of strings. Similarly, the three modes of material nature are performing all the activities, and the living entity, due to his false ego, thinks I am the doer, just like in a dream. I may be experiencing so many things, but once I wake up, I understand that I was not doing anything. So similarly, the soul is in one kind of an illusion, and it thinks that I am actually doing when it's actually sleeping in this material world. Only when the soul engages in devotional service can it be said to be awake. There are four stages of sleep. One is known as deep sleep, and then Jagrata, Swapna, and Turiya. Turiya means conscious state. Sushupti means deep sleep. Uh, Jagrata means awakefulness. Swapna means dreaming state, and Turiya means conscious state. So only when the soul is performing devotional service can it be said to be actually performing anything. Till that time, because the soul is having other desires, so it becomes overcome by false ego, which makes it think that he is the doer, but actually the material modes are performing. This way, the soul becomes bound up in the sense that it thinks that I am doing when it's not doing. Just like if you're enrolled for some course, and if you are doing something else, everything else than what is required for the course, slowly without your knowledge, when the examination comes, you know that you have not done anything and you become afraid. So like that is what is happening. Therefore, Krishna in this chapter is glorifying pure knowledge. As we saw in the last chapter, Krishna outlined what are the 20 qualities for acquiring knowledge. So among that, principally, Krishna said about performing devotional service by surrendering to a spiritual master and rendering service under his guidance. So here, how the jiva comes into contact with material nature, because the jiva is living, conscious. It is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. It's eternal, knowledge, and blissful. It has a form, but material nature is concerned, it is temporary, asat, achit, it is not conscious. It cannot experience happiness, and neither it has a permanent form. But how is it that these two incompatible things come together? And how the material mind modes bind the pure jiva? Although the living entity is superior to this inferior energy, Paraprakriti, Aparaprakriti. Paraprakriti means the living entity, and Aparaprakriti means the material nature. So this material nature is said to be inferior, but it is controlling the superior living entity. So recognizing the prominence of a mode, how do we recognize which mode is prominent? Whether we are in the mode of goodness, whether we are mode in the passion, or whether we are in the mode of ignorance. So once we recognize that, gradually we can rise up to Sattva-guna and go beyond the Sattva-guna. So that is the need for recognizing. So how do we recognize? Based on what we are doing, what we are achieving, and all this criteria will be explained. So just like if you go to a doctor, he has to first diagnose what is the extent of the disease. So similarly, we have to identify how much we are under the control of the three modes, because we saw in the earlier chapters also, this lust, anger are produced from the passion and ignorance. And how do these modes condition the living entity? Condition means just like we are conditioning the air. This says air conditioning. Means the original nature of the air is something else, but we are making it appear in a different way. Similarly, although the living entity is transcendental to the three modes, right now when we see different living entities, we see them as different people because they have different natures. But all these are acquired natures. It is not the original nature. Just like you put a crystal in front of red light, it appears to be red. If you put it in front of green light, it appears to be green, but the crystal as such is colorless. So the living entity is transcendental in three modes, but it appears that many different living entities are in the three modes. We don't see the 84 lakh species of life. All these are produced by multiple combinations of these three modes. The bodies only are varieties. The soul is concerned, almost all of them have qualitatively one, but individuals. Now then the next question is, what is the destination of the death in the different modes? Because we saw in the 8th chapter, whatever one remembers at the time of death, that will determine his next destination. So one may say, okay, let me see at the time of death. Right now, let us not worry about death. But actually, every moment we are dying, in the sense the body is changing. So depending on which mode is influencing us, our body is accordingly changing, our mind is changing, and that is affecting us consciousness also. So therefore, it is important for us to know from the beginning which direction we are going, so that we can correct it before we come to the point of death. Because at the time of death, these three modes will determine what body you will get next. And once you get a particular body, it's very difficult to get rid of that, even if you want to do. Sometimes you see many times people try to attempt to give up their life, but they're not successful. Many times they try, but it doesn't work. Krishna also talks about the result of action in different modes, because at least by sometimes you don't know in which mode you are performing. At least by the result you can say, okay, you must be in this mode. So therefore, if you are very intelligent, you can find out right now in which mode you are operating. If you cannot, at least by the result of the action you are performing, if it is giving distress, happiness, or something mixture of that, accordingly you can say in which mode you are situated. Now, Krishna then talks about transcending the modes. Guna Atita. Guna means the three modes of nature. Atita means beyond. How to go beyond the three modes? Just like an aircraft is there, it's running on the airfield, but after some point it has to go off the field, otherwise it will crash at the end of the runway. So these three modes are also actually helping us. Once we are got into this material world, we have to do our duties. We need the three modes. It's not that we can get rid of three modes artificially. At the same time, we should use these three modes to go beyond the three modes and acquire the original nature. Just like the aircraft is using the runway for a purpose, both for landing and takeoff. So first thing is we have to understand how the modes are operating. How the Sattva-guna, Rajoguna, Tamoguna, or the mode of passion, weakness, and ignorance are carrying out all the activities. Although they are invisible, but we can see the effects of these three modes. So just like I don't see the Prime Minister or any minister day-to-day basis, I don't see them. I only see my family members and friends. But if those ministers or the people are not there, I cannot do anything with my family members. No? The house which I'm living, the power is coming because of some particular government officer or whatever. I'm using the roads because the government is doing. But in day-to-day basis, I don't see any of the government officers. I only see my immediate family members and friends. But nevertheless, they are important. Similarly, although we don't see the modes in action, they are the ones which are doing whatever I want to do. I am thinking that I am the doer, but actually, because these three modes are there, they are doing, I get the feeling that I am doing. And the Lord is concerned, he doesn't depend on these three modes. So how is he able to do his activities without depending on the three modes, whereas we are fully dependent on the three modes? So if you understand about the Lord, because we are qualitatively one with the Lord, we can also achieve that status of transcending the three modes and not depending on them. Because what is the problem in depending on the three modes will be explained shortly. That is, what is the result of transcending? What is the benefit you get by going beyond three? Why should you go beyond these three modes and their influence? Because everyone around us is fully immersed in the three modes. Why we alone should separately endeavor for this? So Arjuna therefore asked three questions about a person who has transcended the three modes. First thing is, what are his symptoms? How do I recognize a person who is beyond the three modes? Just like I can identify a person who's within the three modes, I also need to know the symptoms of a person who's beyond the three modes. Just like when a person was infected with pandemic, there were some symptoms by which we could say that he was infected, and there are symptoms by which he can say that he is free from the disease. What is his behavior? Sometimes a person may be having symptoms, but it may not be visible, asymptomatic, we say. So something may be internal and something may be external. So that is more prominent. The external behavior is more prominent, and some cases the internal, what is going on in one person's mind, we cannot judge. But it is important to know both. And then how by pure devotion one transcends the modes. What is the greatness of pure devotion? And how can it help us to overcome the three modes and come to the level of Brahman? Brahman means our eternity feature. To realize that we are eternal and not, of course, material nature is also eternal, but it's constantly changing. Where our nature is fixed. Fixed in the sense we are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord and we are meant to engage in devotional service. But when we connect ourselves to the Lord through pure devotion, then we can overcome this three modes and be situated in knowledge and bliss. And ultimately, Krishna says how he is the source of that Brahman, or just like uh, someone is awarding you a degree, nobody can whimsically award that degree. He should be authorized to give you that certificate or degree. So similarly, Krishna is the one who enables us to come to that platform, and therefore he is the source of that Brahman. He is the one who is establishing that platform, reaching which we can say that we have overcome the three modes. So in the previous chapter, Lord Krishna talked about the living entity taking up repeated birth and death. So why is that happening? Actually, living entity is eternal, but the body is concerned, it goes through this birth, grows for some time, produces, remains, then produces byproducts, dwindles and vanishes. There are 6 changes which accompany anything in this material world, including the body and the objects. But the soul is concerned, it doesn't undergo any of these changes. Nevertheless, it appears that the living entity is taking birth and dying. So Krishna explained that this is due to the association with the modes of material nature. Just like a very healthy person is there, but once he contacts some disease, then he exhibits some qualities which are different from his original nature. So in this chapter, Krishna explains what those modes of material nature are. Modes means 3 states, just like you have solid, liquid, and gas. These are 3 states of existence of any chemical. So sometimes they may coexist. We call it a triple point or a boiling point or melting point. That is when 2 phases coexist, but invariably only one phase is predominant. And how they work, how these 3 modes operate, how they are able to carry out everything even though invisible, how they bind the living entity. Just like we saw this virus, you cannot see it, but it controls so many living entities. So similarly, 3 modes, although they are not visible, somehow they are able to bind the living entity, which is superior to the 3 modes. At the same time, how they can be destroyed by Krishna Bhakti. Although it's very strong, we'll see in the next chapter also how this whole material existence is originating from the three modes, and how through knowledge one can overcome its influence. So, although we are powerless right now, just like a very weak person is there, somehow there's a very strong person come to help him. Then he can overcome something which he is currently not able to subdue. So this Krishna Bhakti is such like that. So we begin this chapter by seeing how the soul becomes conditioned. Condition means it is not able to perform according to its original nature of eternity, knowledge, bliss, and form. That is because of the material modes. Therefore, Krishna, time and again, whenever he is giving a higher knowledge, he first glorifies it so that we understand its importance. Because Arjuna is patiently hearing him, Krishna is willing to reveal higher and higher knowledge. Just like depending on the person's capacity to digest, we feed him more and more. Similarly, depending on the capacity of the student, the master will give him higher and higher knowledge. So that's what here Krishna is doing. So in the first two verses, Krishna glorifies the knowledge that he's going to reveal in this chapter. So knowledge has to be revealed. Like the last chapter we saw, there is knowledge, object of knowledge, and a knower. Unless these three things are there, we cannot progress in knowledge. Just like so many books are there, so much information is available on the internet. It doesn't mean everyone becomes intelligent or expert. So therefore, Krishna glorifies the knowledge that he is going to reveal. Ultimately, knowledge has to come from another person. Although we may have the books, have the ability to learn something, it has to be taught. So Krishna speaks the highest knowledge because he is our well-wisher. He always wants to give us higher and higher knowledge. Nobody, even Brahma, cannot give us the highest knowledge, although he is the creator. So Param Bhuya Pravakshami. Pravakshami means I shall declare. Param means supreme. Bhuyaha. Jnanam. Jnananam Jnanamuttamam. Very important. Uttamam means best. Jnananam Jnanam means best of all knowledge. And again I shall declare to you this supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge. Of course, why he is saying again? Again means he is trying to explain how bhakti can be approached in many different ways. How can you conclude that bhakti is the highest? So in this chapter, he is telling how bhakti can help us transcend the three modes. The previous chapter, he told how bhakti can produce knowledge. So like that, yajñātva munaya sarve, knowing which, yajñātva means knowing which. Munaya means sages. Sages means who are speculators. They try to analyze and become fixed in some conception. Sarve means all the sages. It is not a few. Param siddhim ito gataha. Param siddhi means supreme. Siddhi means perfection. Ito, attained. Ito gataha means have attained. Again I shall declare to you this supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained the supreme perfection. So what is the next one? What is the result of attaining that knowledge? Idam jnanam upasritya. Idam knowledge means this knowledge. Upasritya means taking shelter. Ashritya means taking shelter. Ashritya means shelter. Upa means by taking. We have to come forward. It's not that it will immediately come to you. Many people say, let God come to me. No, you have to go. You are the one who is going to benefit. So you are the one who has to approach something which is beneficial. By taking shelter of this knowledge, mama sadharmyam agataha. Mama means mine. Sadharmyam means same nature. Dharma means nature. Sadharmyam means my same nature or form. Agataha, one can attain. One can attain same nature or form as mine. What is the same form of Krishna? is Satchit Ananda and Vigraha, eternal, full of knowledge, bliss, and has a form. Sarge pi nopajayante. Sarge means creation. Nopajayante api. One who is freed from repeated birth and death doesn't take birth again. Basically, Sarge api means one who's freed from repeated birth and death or doesn't take birth again. This universal creation. Sarga means creation. Pralaye means destruction. Na vyatanticha or experience pain of death at the universal dissolution. By taking shelter of this knowledge, one can attain the same nature as or form as mind. Form means it's established. It doesn't change. By taking shelter of this knowledge, one can attain the same nature or form as mind. One is freed from repeated birth and death, doesn't take birth again in the universal creation. Universal creation means everyone has to take birth at that time. But if you attain this knowledge, you will be the exception where you will not be forced to take birth or die or experience the pain of death. Or you may say, I'm already in this world. What is the benefit of doing devotion now? Let me first, you free me, then I will do devotion. No, not required. Even if you are caught now, at the time of death, you will not experience pain. And if you're out of this, again, you will not be born again. So that is the result of attaining this particular knowledge. Because knowledge goes with the soul. Having glorified the knowledge, Krishna will now begin to explain the relationship between the jivas, prakriti, and himself. So as we saw in the earlier chapter also, what is Jnayam? The goal of knowledge. Jnanagamyam means goal of knowledge. This, the jiva, the prakriti, and himself. The jiva, how does he come in contact with prakriti or material nature is explained now. Lord impregnates prakriti. Just like as a father is required and a mother is required, then only we can take birth. The material nature of prakriti, Mahat Brahma or Mahat Tattva. Mahat Tattva means unmanifested form of the three modes of material nature. The material nature is actually first in its unmanifest form. Just like we didn't get our body suddenly, we were also in an unmanifest form. Slowly we developed a body which kept growing, and finally the body again becomes unmanifest. So once the body perishes or before the body comes into existence, where was the body? It is there in subtle form, and that subtle form is said to be this Mahat Tattva or Mahat Brahma. Why it is said to be Mahat, although invisible? Because without that, this manifestation will not happen. Although it is not visible, without that, this phenomenal world will not happen without the noumenon. The material nature of Prakriti, Mahat Brahma, Mahat Tattva is the womb that I impregnate, making possible the birth of all jivas. In other words, this contact of the Lord with Prakriti is very subtle. It is not a gross, just like we say a mother and father combined and a child is born. But although we say we are born, living entity is taking his birth because of the combination of the Supreme Lord and this material nature, it is not something gross like we experience in this world. It is happening at a very subtle level. So the material nature of Prakriti, Mahat Brahma, Mahat Tattva is the womb that I impregnate, making possible the birth of all jivas. So this is an analogy. Because we are familiar with the mother's womb, and this is how we analyze things being coming. But it is not the way that the Lord produces. It is very subtle. That's why it is said Mahat. Prakriti is called Mahat because it extends through all place and time. At the same time, it is beyond place and time. It is not having just like when we see the body is at one place and one time only. After some time, the body will be different, and it cannot be in different places at the same time. It has to be in one place. But this Mahat, why this Prakriti is said to be Mahat? This because it extends through all place and time continuously. It is called Brahma because it is the cause of expansion. In other words, the Prakriti is such that it keeps on increasing in size. Just like a banyan tree is there. Originally, it has a very small seed, but that seed grows into a very huge tree. In comparison to the seed, it is incomparable. So Krishna is the father and Prakriti is the mother of all jivas. Sarva yonishu kaunteya. Yoni means species. Sarva means all species of life. There are 84 lakh species, out of which we have 11 lakh species of insects, and then you have birds, 30 lakh, then you have water body, living entities in the water, living entities on the land, living entities on the air, and then human beings. Like this, you have 84 lakh species. 30, 20, 11, 10, 4, like that. If you combine all this, you get 84 lakh species. Sarvayonishu kaunteya, murtaya sambhavantiya. Murtaya means made possible. Sorry, sambhavanti means made possible. Murtaya means by birth. All species are life. Son of Kunti are made possible with birth. Tasam Brahma Mahat Yonir. In this material nature, the mother. Mahat Yoni means the mother. Brahma means living entity. Aham Bija Pradha Pita. Bija means seed giving father. Pradha Pita means seed giving father, as Mahavishnu. All species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible with birth in this material nature, the mother. I, as Mahavishnu, am the seed giving father. So when Mahavishnu glances at this Prakriti, just by that glance, the three modes become manifest. And then they combine together and produce all the different bodies and different planets, which the living entities are able to occupy. Now, how the material nature binds the pure jiva? Because material nature is impure, but how it can bind the pure living entity? Just like a healthy person becomes sick, jiva's bondage under the spell of modes. Sattvam, rajas, tama iti. Sattva means goodness, raja means passion, tama means ignorance. Guna, prakriti, sambhavaha. These three gunas are produced of material nature. Prakriti, sambhava means produce of material nature. These three gunas. In other words, material nature is an unmanifest form that is known as the Mahat Brahma. That becomes transformed into three gunas. Little difficult to, but just by hearing many unknown subjects, eventually at one day we will understand. Nibadnanti Mahabaho. Mahabaho means mighty armed one. So Krishna is encouraging Arjuna that you are situated on the soul platform. Nibadnanti, they bind. He is talking about others who are bound. Goodness, passion, ignorance, these three gunas are produced of material nature, O mighty armed one. They bind. Whom do they bind? Dehe, Dehinam, Abjayam. Changeless living entity. So Abhyayam means changeless. Dehe, Dehinam. The goodness, passion, ignorance, these three gunas are produced of material nature, O mighty armed one. They bind the changeless living entity in the material body. Just like a spider is there. The spider is a very small insect, but from it produces some saliva, and with that saliva it puts a web. And sometimes we see an insect which is more powerful than the spider gets caught in that web, and eventually because it cannot move, it dies. And happily the small spider comes and eats that insect. So this is what is happening. So next we talk about the bondage by the three gunas. First, how do we know that a person is bound by Sattva guna? Just like in the prison, we have first class prisoners, second class prisoners, and third class prisoners. So how do we recognize a person bound by the Sattva guna? In other words, even in the mode of goodness, it is not the ideal situation. Tatra sattvam nirmalatvat. The mode of nirmalatva means purest. Tatra sattvam nirmalatvat. The mode of goodness is the purest of the three modes in comparison. Prakashakam anamayam. What is the quality of a person in the mode of goodness? It is illuminating. It means it appears that he knows everything. And he is also free from sins. Relatively, he is doing less sinful activity, and therefore he is also in less distress compared to the people in Rajoguna and Tamoguna. Sukha sangena badnati. But there's one problem. Those situated in the mode jnana sangena cha anaga, those situated in this mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness. In other words, whatever they consider as happiness, they think that is all in all. They become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge, which means they think that whatever I know is sufficient. I don't need to know anything more than this. But in the end, Krishna is saying, Anagha, O sinless. In other words, Krishna is telling to Arjuna, even this Sattva is one kind of a sin. Sin because the Sattva prevents one from acting on the transcendental goodness or the original nature of the soul. The next is talking about the bondage by the mode of passion. How do we recognize a person who is bound by the mode of passion? Rajo ragatmakam viddhi Trishna Sangha Samudbhavam Tannibadnati Kaunteya Karma Sangena Dehinam. So, Rajo Ragatmakam. Ragatmakam means desire or attachment. The mode of passion is born of desire. The motivating force for the more in the man in the mode of passion is desire. He has unlimited desires. Rajo Ragatmikam Vitti Trishna. Trishna means desire. Trishna Sangha Samudbhavam. And Tan Nibatnati Kaunteya. So the mode of passion is born of desire, attachment for the attained and longing for the unattained. He has two problems. One is whatever he has attained, he is very much attached with it and doesn't want to let go of it. And whatever he has not attained, he is always hankering for that. Therefore, he is lamenting and hankering. Lamenting that he may lose something, hankering for what he has not yet achieved. O son of Kunti, and because of this, the embodied living being, what is the result of his karma sangena dehinam? Because of this, the embodied living entity is bound to material fruitive activities. He is forced to do activities which he need not do. Just like a child is there, it has so many desires, it cannot sit in one place. Always it wants to do some mischief. The mode of passion is born of desire, attachment for the attained, and longing for the unattained, the son of Kunti, and because of this, the embodied living entity is bound to material fruitive activities. Many times we see some animals, they get trapped because of some particular weakness or particular desire. The mode of passion is characterized by the attraction between man and woman. And when the passion is increased, one develops hankering for material enjoyment and works very hard and becomes bound to his activities. So if you see, analyze carefully why this whole world is running, ultimately it is because of attraction between man and woman, and that produces unlimited suffering. Then what about the bondage by tamoguna? Tamastvajnana tam vidhi mohanam sarvadehinam pramadalasya nidravis tannibadnati bharata. Tamas Prajnanajam Vidhi. What is the characteristic of the mode of darkness? It is born of ignorance. Just like we saw, passion is born of desire and sattva is born of knowledge. This tamoguna is born of ignorance. What is the ignorance? Delusion of all. Delusion. Delusion means everything they see it opposite way. And pramada. Pramada means they are prone to do mistakes. And alasya means laziness. Or prone to make mistake means they're mad. Mad people means they do everything the wrong way. And alasya means lazy. Mitra means sleep. Know that the mode of darkness born of ignorance is the delusion of all embodied living entities. This mode binds the jiva with madness, laziness, and sleep. Bharata, O son of Bharata. Again and again, Krishna is encouraging Arjuna by saying that all these defects are not there in you. Goodness conditions one to happiness, passion conditions one to fruitive action, and ignorance covering one's knowledge binds one to madness. In other words, the person in the mode of goodness is happy, thinking that I am happy and that I have all the knowledge. The person in the mode of passion gets happiness by doing work, and work. And the person in the mode of ignorance is doing everything opposite and suffering. Now, how do we recognize the prominence? How do we, because these modes are in competition. Sometimes I'm a good person, sometimes a passionate person, sometimes an ignorant person. Is always in competition. So how do I know which is predominant? Because there's always competition. And This is a fact. That's why we see sometimes the demigods and demons are always quarreling, because those natures are there within every one of us. The modes appear and disappear according to the operation or exhaustion of old karma. So, what is driving these three modes? Depending on our past activities, they drive us in particular mode. If you are predominantly in the mode of goodness in the past, we get driven by that. The prominence of certain mode is manifested in one's dealings, activities, etc. Just like there are symptoms of a sick person, we can, by the prominence of these three modes, are found in the dealings. One who is actually intent on advancing bhakti has to transcend these three modes. Just like if you have to go to a place, first of all, you should know where you are. Similarly, unless we know in which mode we are situated, from there we can work our way out of the three modes. When goodness increases all the nine gates of the body, nine gates means there are the ways to acquire knowledge. We have eyes, we have ears, we have a nose, we have the mouth, and we operate through the genitals and anus. So all these, when goodness increases, all the nine gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge. In other words, the one can see, hear, and taste things in the right position. They can make the best use of this nine gates and acquire knowledge and acquire happiness. Otherwise, these produce ignorance and suffering. So when passion increases, the symptoms of greed, fruitive activity, intense endeavor, and uncontrollable desire and hankering develop. How do we recognize the prominence of passion? When we become too much greedy, when we are over endeavoring, and fruitive activity means we are controlled by the results, and we have uncontrolled desires and hankering, passion. Person is never satisfied with the position he has already acquired. This is another problem. Even though he works hard and achieves something, still he is not satisfied. And what about the more, when ignorance increases, darkness, aprakasha, means he sees everything, he doesn't see anything, basically. Aprakasha means he is always in darkness. Inertia, apravrittihi. Pravritti means change. Apravritti means he is not able to change the situation. If he is stuck in one point, he cannot move. If he is already doing something, he cannot stop it. Then madness, pramada, which means he does everything he does is a mistake. An illusion, moha. Why he does mistakes? Because he sees everything the wrong way. Discrimination is absent. More or less, his intelligence is not functioning. He is only dictated by the mind. So what is the effect of conditioning by the modes? You may say, I don't care about all this. So Krishna is explaining the destiny, the long-term effect. First, he is talking about the long-term effect, the destination after death, and the medium-term effect, that is the immediate effect, and the jiva's direction in the universe after death. Long-term effect, that is the destination after death, the medium-term effect, and immediate effect. What is the destination after death for a person in the mode of goodness? He achieves higher planets. Urdhvam gacchanti satvastha. Or he goes to even up to Brahmaloka, Janaloka, where saintly people are living. He can go there. And the mode of passion, he is born again in this earthly planet. Earthly planet means there are many planets like the earth. They are said to be the Bhumandala. A birth among those engaged in fruitive activities. What is the only in the earthly planets you can do some activity, karmas. Once you go to the higher planets, you're only enjoying the results of a karma. When you go to the lower planets, only you're suffering the results of karma, but karma can be done only in this middle planetary system. Just like in some countries, we see they are so rich, they don't have much work to do. Or there are some countries where people are working and working and not making much out of income. So this passion is such that, and ignorance is birth in lower species, the animal kingdom, which means they have very limited choices, animals and the plants. So after death, a person, the mode of goodness, goes to higher planets and higher life forms. The mode of passion, he comes back to the earth planet, and in the mode of ignorance, it goes to the lower species, either on this planet or the lower planets. Then what is the result of action in the mode of goodness? That is the immediate result: purity without distress. Nirmalam. and knowledge, jnana, higher planets up to Brahmaloka, Urdhvam. Then what is the result of passion? Misery, dukkham. Although he is working hard, he is only getting distress. And he is becoming more and more greedy, lobha. Whatever he is having, he is not satisfied. He is always thinking about what the other person is having. And therefore he attains the middle earthly planets where all others are competing like him. The mode of ignorance is foolish, ajnanam. He cannot see things clearly. He is mad. Pramada means committing mistakes. Illusion means moha. He sees everything in the wrong way. And therefore he attains the lower or hellish planets where there is unwanted suffering. Sattvat sanjayate jnanam rajaso lova evacha pramada mohau tamaso bhavato jnanam evacha urdhvam gachanti sattvastha madhye tishtanti rajasa jaganya gunavrittistha adho gachanti tamasa. Whatever has been told here has been summarized in this particular verse. Now Krishna will explain how to transcend the modes and explains his own position in relation to them. Now Krishna is going to give the solution. How to transcend the modes or become guna atita. So jnana stresses discrimination. How through discrimination one learns to appreciate that he is not the body. And Krishna is supreme and that he should take shelter of Krishna to become free. Just like if you are bound, you are put in a well. Someone who is outside the well only can help you to get out of it. Similarly, a person who is beyond the three modes can only help us to go beyond the three modes. It's not that everyone can transcend, only someone who has the capacity. So only a devotee can overcome because he is taking help of Krishna or taking shelter of Krishna. Thus, jnana is a path that culminates in bhakti. In other words, first 6 chapters tell us how action can help us come to bhakti. The last 6 chapters tell us how knowledge can help us to come bhakti. And the middle 6 chapters tell us how bhakti can elevate us. Now, first thing is one has to, first of all, to transcend the three modes. First of all, you should accept that the modes are doing. Nanyam gunebhya kartaram yada drishtanu pashyanti. That is, when one sees that there is no other performer action than the material modes. When you recognize that only the material modes is doing and I am not doing anything, it gives two benefits. One is you don't suffer because you realize that I am not doing. And at the same time, you know that I have something else to do, and this material nature will do its job anyway. So, which means I have to do devotion. Then this material nature will become subservient to me. But if I don't do the devotion, I become dominated by these three modes. When one sees there is no other performer of action than the material modes, gunebhyascha param veti madbhavam so adhigacchati. He knows that the Supreme Lord and even the Jiva is transcendental to the modes. He attains my spiritual nature, crossing beyond this material existence. When one sees that there is no other performer action than the material modes, it's very difficult to accept this. But this is the fact. When one sees that there is no other performer action than the material modes and knows that the Supreme Lord, even the Jiva is transcendental to the modes, he attains my spiritual nature, crossing beyond this material existence. There are 4 categories of people. One is the active fool. Active fool means he is doing everything wrong. Then there is the lazy fool, at least sometimes he is not doing mischief. Then there is the active intelligent. He thinks that I have to do something, so I will do. But above them is the lazy intelligent. He knows that there are some things which I have to do, some things I need not do, and I can make others do. So like that, this intelligent soul, he understands that material nature, it will do its job, provided I do my job, which is to doing devotion. That's why we see the top man in the biggest company, he's doing very little work. But there are so many people working hard for him. So why is that? Because he knows his position and what is their position. Similarly, if we know our position and the position of the Lord and the material nature, then it will fall in place. So when one can surpass the modes of material nature associated with the body, which give rise to the body, he can become free from birth, death, old age, and the distress and enjoy nectar even in the present life and attain eternal life. So what is the benefit of transcending the three modes? Our present life will be peaceful and our future life is also going to be eternal. So now therefore Arjuna is asking, he's now become interested in knowing how to transcend the three modes. So voluntarily he is asking what are the symptoms? Just like in the second chapter, he talked about Sthita Prajna. Sthita Prajna means knowledge, one who is fixed in knowledge. How do you know a person is steady in knowledge? So that Krishna explained. In this chapter, Krishna is explaining how a person is fixed in transcendence or gunatita. Arjuna's questions about what symptoms is he known, what is his behavior, what is the process of transcending the modes. Just like when we have a disease, we want to know what are the symptoms, what will be the effects of it, and how to overcome them. A very basic type of question. Now, what is Krishna's answer to this? First, he is telling about the symptoms, that he doesn't hate illumination, attachment, or delusion when they are present and long for them when they disappear. So when sometimes if you give the person too much knowledge also, he hates it. He said, don't preach to me. I don't like you to give me so much advice. So there are some people like, so they hate illumination. Just like the owl is there, it doesn't like light. It wants to be in darkness. There are some people, if you put on the light, they'll say, no, 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 switch off the light. I don't want the light. So some people hate illumination and they hate attachment. They want to be detached because if they're attached, they cannot achieve some things. They want to cut off all their ties with people. And delusion. They, sometimes delusion is also required because if all the time if you're thinking about the problem, then you will not be able to progress in life. So some amount of delusion, the forgetfulness of the problem is also required. And there are some people who invite this uh, doesn't hate illumination, attachment, or delusion when they are present or long for them when they disappear. So some people are struggling for knowledge or struggling for attachment. So either don't go to the extremes. Too much knowledge or no knowledge, too much attachment or no attachment, too much delusion or no delusion. They want all problems to be solved. So that is also not possible. So what is the behavior of a gunatita? What is his external conduct? We talked about the internal. What is the external? Neutral, udasina, undisturbed by the reaction of the modes, gunair yona vichalyate, knowing that the modes alone are active. He knows that these three modes will always produce ups and downs in life. Therefore, they will do their job. I will do my job of being transcending the three modes. Equal to happiness and distress, samadukka, shuka, firmly situated in self-swastha. See, it's a lump of earth, the stone and gold are the same, which means that it doesn't mean that the stone and earth and gold are same uh, in one sense, but they are same in the sense that all can be utilized equally effectively. In some situation, earth can do the job where stone and gold cannot serve purpose. In some situation, the stone can be more effective than earth and gold, and sometimes gold can be more effective than earth and stone. In other words, in the earlier days, there was a comic kind of thing that around the world in 80 days. So he will be having so many objects. He knows when to use which. So like that, neutral and undisturbed by the reactions of the modes, knowing that the modes are active, equal to happiness and distress, firmly situated in self, sees a lump of earth, stone, and gold as the same, equal towards dear and not dear, steady, dhira, equal towards praise and blame, equal in honor and dishonor, equal treats friends and enemy alike, renounces all material activities. So this was all explained earlier chapters also, just repeating that. Here particularly one important part, Sarvaramba Parityagi. Aramba means you always thinking I should do something new. That is a big defect actually. Sometimes entrepreneurship or some new concept is good, but if you are simply reinventing what has already been done, that's a waste of time. So Sarvaramba means he is trying what has already been given up by someone. He is again thinking I will do that. So that is the problem. So that has to be given up. So in conclusion, Krishna talks about pure bhakti, which is the process of transcending the modes. Mamchayo Vivicharena Bhakti Yogena Sevate Sagunan Samatiketan Brahmabhuaya Kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances. Here two things are there, full, which means it should be wholehearted and uninterrupted. At once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. It is immediate. The result of doing devotion you can feel immediately. So last words. ब्रह्मणो हि प्रतिष्ठाहम् अमृतस्याव्यस्य च शाश्वतस्य धर्मस्य शुकस्यैकान्तिकस्य च So one of the levels, once you transcend the three modes, you will attain first stage. What is the first stage I know that I have achieved? There may be multiple stages in going towards transcendence. The first stage is Brahman realization. Just like you have cleared the first exam. Brahmano, that first step is saying, I am the basis or shelter of the impersonal Brahman. First realization is that I am eternal. Next realization that I am knowledge. I have knowledge. And third realization, I am bliss. I can experience bliss. And the fourth realization is that I have a form which is comprising Satchitananda. So Krishna says, I am the first step. I am the basis or shelter of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, eternal, and is the constitutional position or platform of ultimate bliss. In other words, if you want to become happy in life, the first step is to realize that you are eternal. And Krishna says, that is, I am the one who's enabling you to come to that platform. Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So there is a question from Harsh Chaurasia. How do we know that we are over endeavoring for a particular task? Also, should we over endeavor if that particular task is our duty?
Yeah, if it is obstructing your devotion, which is your main activity, already we said that the three modes of material nature are doing everything. So over endeavoring means when we try to do the work of material nature when our work is to do devotion. So, but at the same time, we cannot ignore the three modes because we have the body, we have the mind currently. Just like I cannot be doing devotion all the time. I have my dependents. They have to be engaged. So they may not be in devotion. My neighbors may not be in devotion. So I have to deal with them also. So I have to keep them engaged. To that extent, it's okay, but it should not affect my devotion. Over endeavoring means if it is putting your devotion to risk, which is your main activity, then it is known as over endeavoring. How should we also should be over endeavor if that particular task is a duty? Yeah, so it depends on what is our duty. As we said in the very beginning of this Bhagavad Gita sessions, first there are two types of duty. One is duty of the body and the mind, and the duty of the soul. So to that extent, whatever is required to be, maintain the body and the mind or to maintain the soul, that one has to perform, and that is not over endeavor. Basically, if it is obstructing us from reaching the goal, then it is over endeavor. If it deviates us from our goal, then it's over endeavor. So we have to constantly check whether the three checks are there. Sambandha. First, we should never forget what is our relationship with this other living entities, material nature, and the Supreme Lord. This we cannot change. It's an eternal fact. If you're trying to change that relationship, then it's over endeavor. Then Abhideya means acting in that relationship. There are already set rules how much we have to work. For example, for a Brahmana, what is your work? For a Kshatriya, what is the work? How to achieve the result? Vaishya, Shudra, everything is clearly defined. So if you act according to those guidelines, it is not over endeavor. And then Prayojana. Ultimately, it should produce happiness. If at the end of all the endeavor you are feeling distressed or miserable, then it means it is endeavor in the wrong direction. Ultimately, we are happy, we are blissful entities, and we should, whether it's devotion or our material duties, they should bring happiness, at least satisfaction.
There is one more question. What from Kirti Bhatia? What is the difference between object of knowledge and goal of knowledge?
So that is there in the 13th chapter. One is knowledge. Knowledge means comprises knowing about the 20 qualities which are required for acquiring knowledge. Then object of knowledge means, yes, I have a body. With this body, what I should know, come to know. Because indirectly only you can come to know about the soul. Because we saw in the second chapter, the soul is inconceivable. Just like an electron is there, I cannot see an electron, but I can see the electron by its effects. Similarly, I can see the soul by its effect it produces on the body. In other words, the body or this material world is there for us to know ultimately about the soul. The phenomenal knowledge should help us to understand the noumenal. So The knowledge is there, available in the world around us, and there is a process for acquiring that knowledge. And once you acquire that knowledge, what is the test that you have learned something? The test is that this knowledge should help you to realize yourself and to realize the super soul. Because this knowledge which you have in this world is material, and the soul is transcendental, it is spiritual. Super soul is also spiritual, transcendental. So this object of knowledge means knowing the soul, about the soul and the super soul. Okay, now if I have this knowledge, then what I should achieve with this knowledge? That is the goal of knowledge. Goal of knowledge is to engage in devotional service. Just like if you have a qualification as a doctor or an engineer, that is not sufficient unless you act on that platform, act like a doctor, act like an engineer. Then only the goal of that knowledge is achieved. Just by having a degree, it is not going to help. You have to put it into practice and give benefit to others. So the goal of knowledge is to engage in devotional service. That's why this Jnana Yoga chapters, they are incomplete without devotion. Okay. Thank you very much. If there's no further questions, we will end here. So we'll be doing this 14th chapter in detail from Monday to Friday, every day 7 to 8 in English as well as in Hindi. The next week we'll meet again for the 15th chapter, which is also the shortest chapter and the most important chapter as usual, Yoga of the Supreme Person or Purushottama Yoga. There are also the 3 essential verses of Bhagavad Gita are mentioned, just as we have 4 essential verses in the 10th chapter. The 3 essential verses, that is the living entity, the super soul, and Bhagavan. These 3 points are explained in the 15th chapter. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Who's the host? You can end the session.
Yes, Roji, I'm ending the session.